Both men and women have hormones. There might be some variations, of course, but we all have them. And it's equally important that both men and women understand what they are, how they work, and how to take care of them. But with an increasing number of hormone-related conditions and diseases in women, it is more important that we understand how women's health is highly affected by the endocrine system. I'm your host, Cody, and join me as I discover the hidden secrets of women's health and hormone balancing.
Hi, I'm Dr. Felice Gersh, and I'm a board-certified OBGYN. I'm also board-certified in integrative medicine, and I'm the medical director of the Integrative Medical Group of Irvine, located in Irvine, California. I started out my career as what I would call a very conventional OBGYN. I did thousands of deliveries, and I really specialized in gynecological surgery. In fact, for many years, I taught surgery as an assistant clinical professor at USC. I was an early adapter of every pharmaceutical that came out, of every surgical device, and I wanted to be cutting edge. What I found as the years went by, that many of these really cutting edge things got taken off the market, got black box warnings, and had created a lot of problems. So I started getting a little jaded, and I started sort of being a little bit more cautious about being the first out of the box to use everything as soon as it was available. And then it really hit me. After many years, 25 years of doing obstetrics, I had to leave that behind. I just had to go to sleep. I was very dedicated to my patients. Even when other people could cover, I wanted to be there when my patients had their babies. So it was sort of for me all or nothing, so I just retired from doing obstetrics. That left me with gynecology. And I looked at my toolbox, and I was very good at surgery, but I didn't want to just deal with end-stage disease. And then I looked at what tools I had to treat people to help them from developing end-stage diseases, and what did I have? Not much. I had birth control pills and a couple of pharmaceuticals that had a lot of problems associated with them. So I felt really lost. In fact, I was totally lost. And I started my journey. I started going to conferences. It started out with naturopathic doctors. I didn't even know who they were, but I liked their philosophy of trying to help the body to heal itself. And at one of their conferences, I came across another MD, Dr. Lodog. And I went up to her and I said, Dr. Lodog, I am so lost. I'm going from conference to conference. I have no aim. I'm just trying to figure out how to help people. And she said, come to the Integrative Fellowship at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. So I went home. I was in Portland. I flew home. I did the application, and 2 weeks later, I was in Tucson. 2 years later, I graduated from the fellowship. I took the board exam. I became board certified in integrative medicine, one of the very few OBGYNs who have done that path. And now I'm on a journey to teach about the new, really, it should be the only way of practicing medicine, incorporating lifestyle, proper nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress control, looking to avoid toxins, and using targeted supplements, nutraceuticals, and so forth to really optimize health. In the past, I used to be actually a speaker for a big pharma. I taught doctors about new drugs, and I left that all behind, and I never looked back.
I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been in private practice since 2001. I specialize in women's health and hormone balancing, but I treat men, women, and children for a variety of acute and chronic health issues. I do a ton of digestive issues, for example. I was actually a psychology major in undergrad, and when I got out of school, I took the only job I could get with my degree, which was working in shelters with adjudicated youth and in inpatient treatment facilities with teenage girls. And I did that for about 3.5 years, not being much older than them at the time. And what happened to me in that process was that I got a real look at the system and kind of what that system offers to help people heal. So these were young women that came from the most horrible circumstances, really. And what we were giving them was lousy food, institutionalized food, minimal exercise, a lot of pharmacologic support, and some therapy. And when I got out of there after 3.5 years, I was perplexed, because I felt like, how does that heal someone, really?
Mental health is really huge. I mean, you have to have proper mental health to have a happy life. And mental illness now is really on the upswing. So women have twice the incidence of both anxiety and depression as do men. They also have much more trouble with insomnia, which of course links to everything. You can name it, insomnia is going to be a contributing factor. So women are more prone to having mental illness, and we definitely have to work on that. So the first thing is this incredible new understanding of this little civilization that lives within us that's called the gut microbiome. And we have this gut-brain axis, but it's more complicated than that. It's really the gut immune hormonal brain axis, because it all links together, right? So it's really amazing. So estrogen is often really out of balance in so many women today. And estrogen, this is also not well recognized, has receptors on all the immune cells of the body, including what are called the innate immune cells, the ones that are the first responders, the ones that go into action, like if a bacteria tries to invade the body. And they are there to explode the mast cells, which are the first responders. They explode with their inflammatory contents to kill bacteria. But what happens is when you have this abnormal gut microbiome, you have endotoxins, toxins produced by bacteria that are abnormal within the gut. Now that wouldn't be a problem if it just stayed in the gut, but because things are so altered and the hormones are altered, and birth control pills contribute to this, you have what's called impaired gut barrier function, also known as leaky gut. So these toxins produced inside the gut pass through into the body proper. And there lies the immune system, ready to go into action to protect you if you got an infection coming in from the gut. So these particles called lipopolysaccharides pass into the immune system that surrounds the gut, which is like 70+% of the immune system lines the gut to protect us, because it's such a key interface between the outside world and our inner bodies. And what happens is when these toxins come through, the immune cells that are there explode with their inflammatory contents. And when you don't have proper hormone balance, they're actually hypersensitive. So it takes less to stimulate more inflammation. And when you have this inflammation in the gut, it also goes to the liver through the enterohepatic circulation, and then you have an inflamed liver. The liver starts to become fatty, which is an epidemic, and this fatty liver then spews out sugar. It makes sugar. The liver can do that, and fats, and it circulates. So now you have high sugar, which then promotes more inflammation, because then you have higher insulin levels, which then ups the inflammatory state. And when you have this inflammation, you not only get the gut barrier that becomes leaky, you have the blood-brain barrier that becomes leaky. So then we live in a world of environmental toxins, heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, flame retardants, and all these different things. And these can actually then cross into the brain, creating even more inflammation. All this inflammation goes to the brain. So we now know that emotional problems, cognitive problems, which are totally interconnected as well, it's really a form of neuroinflammation. So the brain is like brain on fire. And of course, there are other things that can contribute. Head injuries, which are so common. You know, people are playing sports. I've seen it from volleyball, from, of course, with males, football, but there's so many sports that women are involved with, and just riding a bike and they fall over and, you know, hit their head. It happens in just about everyone's life, that there's some sort of head trauma. So it all is additive. It's complex, but it doesn't help to ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist, and then medicate with an antidepressant, which obviously addresses none of these issues, not at all. So we need to get down to basics. We need to take every patient as the unique woman she is, look at her environment, her habits, everything that goes into making her who she is, and then start from the ground up to help her to optimize her health and have the mental health that she needs to have a healthy, happy life. So the menstrual cycle is a vital sign of female well-being, of female health. And when when things are not working right, when the menstrual cycle is not properly happening, that is such a red flag that there is something really wrong, often many things wrong. And we should deal with that, because when you don't, you're basically kicking the can down the road, because you're really covering up issues involving nutrient deficiencies, circadian rhythm disorder, all kinds of stress issues, so many problems that are not being addressed. And they will come back to haunt these young women. I'm seeing young girls right after they're going through puberty or during their puberty, and their periods are coming, and they're coming sometimes too early, which is a huge problem, and then sometimes they're coming too late, sometimes they're not coming at all. There's so many problems. And when they do get their periods, they're often terrible. So they have horrible cramps, they're heavy bleeding, they typically have a lot of elevated androgen. So they may have facial hair, which is called hirsutism, often cystic acne, which is just not, it won't respond to normal treatments. It's very recalcitrant. And they'll have alopecia, they'll lose hair, it's like, what kind of a thing is that for a young woman in her 20s? She has to shave in the morning, she has terrible skin, she's losing her hair, and about 80% are overweight and obese. And they can't lose the weight. They're very good at making fat, they're not good at burning fat. And often they've already been to other doctors, and their moms bring them in. And they've been told, you should go on birth control pills. That's like the reflex reaction to everything that's wrong. It's just go on birth control pills. And they say they're good for you. And I say, that's not getting to the root cause. I'm seeing young women now in their late 20s, and they were put on birth control pills by some other doctor when they were 14, 15. They've been on it for over a decade, and now they're having depression, anxiety. They're often having problems with sleep, and not just mood disorders. They're having tremendous musculoskeletal problems, and they're having gut problems. Many of them are already developing autoimmune diseases. And all of these things are linked to the whole package. Birth control pills are a part of the problem, but the original issues have never been addressed. And here they are, very young women, not even 30 years of age, and they're already developing chronic medical problems. For example, if a woman has uterine fibroids, so it's like the conventional traditional approaches, we'll watch them. We'll watch it. Watch it. What are you watching for? Well, when it gets really bad and they get really big, we'll do surgery, right? We'll cut them out. Polycystic ovary syndrome, which is the most common endocrine disorder of women, as many as 1 in 5 women now, maybe even more, have polycystic ovary syndrome. It's a total body metabolic dysfunction. It involves prediabetes risk, hypertension risk, tremendous problems with fertility. It's the #1 cause of infertility in women. They have irregular cycles, and the conventional approaches give them birth control pills, metformin, and spironolactone. The problem is none of that is addressing the underlying issues. And so polycystic ovary syndrome also has a genetic link. So women who have that have an innate mild deficiency in their capability of turning testosterone into estradiol, the predominant estrogen that's made from the ovaries. They don't do that as well as other women, but they still do it. But when you add in the conventional standard American diet, and they get gut inflammation and leaky gut and all the wrong bacteria growing, and that increases their inflammatory state, and they're exposed to all these endocrine disruptors. The one that has the most research is BPA, bisphenol A. When you combine all of that, it really alters the way their body is working fundamentally, which isn't being repaired by going on those pharmaceuticals. The analogy that I use, and basically like a Band-Aid, is that if there's a wall and it's filled with mold and termites, and you say, oh, that's so much trouble to deal with it, so I'm just going to cover it over with some pretty wallpaper, but the mold and termites are still there, destroying that wall, that structure. And that's what's happening to these young women. And it's just breaking my heart. That's why they really have to know. We have to find out what's going on and repair the problem so they have healthy menstrual cycles. A lot of times people, in fact almost all the time, it's not recognized that reproductive functions in a woman, which of course revolves around the menstrual cycle, is intimately linked to the entire health of the woman. It's not separate. We're one person. In fact, all the features of the body, the heart, the circulatory system, the gut, the brain, everything is actually there to support reproduction. People don't realize it because the prime directive of life is to create new life. And every function in the body is really designed to support the reproductive functions. See, people don't realize that. And so nature did not want an unhealthy woman to have a baby, to be pregnant, because that would be fruitless, because she would become ill during the pregnancy. The baby would die, she might die. So it's all interconnected. So nature actually has sensors to see what's the nutrient sensor. Like what's the nutrient status of a woman? Is she healthy? Does she have the right fat stores? All those things. Does she have everything that she needs to be a healthy mom? And it's all linked. So you can't just cut off the reproductive functions or treat it, like you said, with a Band-Aid and think the rest of the body is going to be humming along.
Birth control pills will help a lot of these people symptomatically. So I do think that a lot of these doctors give a lot of hope with their prescription pad, right? The problem is that, first of all, some people don't tolerate the birth control pill well. Second of all, you're not fixing anything, you're just masking the symptoms, right? So you're just suppressing hormonal fluctuations and hormonal changes and masking the symptoms. And that might be nice temporarily, but that often comes back at some point to be problematic. So it's a stopgap measure. And I myself, I'm a naturopathic doctor, I practice integratively. I have had some situations where I've recommended the pill. And that's the beauty of this kind of comprehensive care. It's like you have to look at who is sitting across the room from you. Because sometimes you can start over here with diet and lifestyle, and sometimes you have to do something to provide some relief very quickly, and then you work your way back. Right? So everything's on the table as far as I'm concerned. But really the predominant offering for women with a lot of these issues is birth control pill, an antidepressant, and these things all come with a cost. Nothing's free.
A recent event that I put on, I offered a number of pieces of information to people, and hormone balancing was the single top favorite piece of information that people most requested. More and more people are aware that hormone function supports not only libido, of course, and fertility, if you're of the age for fertility, but it also is a big part of your cognitive function, your heart health, your ability to gain muscle mass or avoid something called sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting as you age. There are all kinds of benefits to having hormones that are medium to high rather than medium to low in their number.
When I say hormones, I kind of think about it in three major categories. So we do a lot of thyroid hormones, sex hormones, and then adrenal hormones. And they all talk to each other. So hormones are basically just chemical messengers that send signals throughout the body to tell the body to do something. So thyroid controls metabolism. How quickly we lose weight or retain weight. It talks to our hair, how fast to grow, our skin, our digestive tract. So when people are feeling sluggish and they have dry skin and they're not going to the bathroom well and their brain's foggy, a lot of times that's because their thyroid is underfunctioning. So we'll look at those thyroid hormones, we'll look at how it's converting in the body, and we'll support that. Now, all the hormones are talking to each other, so you can't really just treat one aspect without looking at the others. So while I'm treating thyroid, I'm looking at the adrenal gland, which produces cortisol, our stress hormone, as well as a few other hormones like adrenaline, norepinephrine. So we'll support the adrenals while we're supporting the thyroid, and then the sex hormones, typically estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Both men and women have all of these, and then some of the other hormones that go with it. So hormones really can make a huge impact in our mood, in our ability to build muscle, our weight, our brain functioning. Hormones are really important for all of our health.
What I like to start with is, I like to assess the endocrine system. I want to look at the thyroid to see if there's any issues there. And unfortunately, most conventional docs will just run a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And if it's within the normal range, they won't go beyond that. But you're only getting a very small piece of the picture if you're not looking at the thyroid hormones that the thyroid is putting out. So TSH is what stimulates the thyroid to produce thyroid hormones. But if you don't look at the response to TSH, you're only getting part of the picture. We don't know if the thyroid is responding adequately. So we want to see if the hormones that the thyroid are putting out are adequate and where they fall within the reference range. You also want to initially screen somebody for thyroid antibodies. Hashimoto's thyroiditis and Graves' disease can be very common, and that's autoimmune activity against the thyroid. So I want to screen people for that because it gives me a clue into what might be coming for them down the line and where we might need to jump in and get them off of inflammatory foods or test them for food allergies or look for infections that may be promoting some kind of autoimmune reaction that could be affecting thyroid function. Because all of their thyroid numbers could look normal, but if they've got elevated antibodies, that's a problem. It means we need to start going a little deeper and looking at what's triggering those antibodies. I also look at cholesterol. I do a lipid panel, see where they are with cholesterol and triglycerides and LDL and HDL. I also like to look at their fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, which is a record of blood sugar control for about 2 months worth of time. So it tells you how well you've managed your blood sugar over a 2-month period. If you're only looking at fasting glucose and hemoglobin A1C, you're only seeing the dynamic of the measurement of glucose in the blood, but it doesn't tell you what your body is having to do to keep it at that level. So if you measure a fasting insulin, your blood glucose could be completely normal, but if your fasting insulin is high, it's telling you that your pancreas is having to work overtime to keep your blood sugar under control. And it can only do that for so long. And it also tells you that you may have some insulin resistance. So you have to put out more insulin to do the job of a little bit of insulin. So there's some insulin resistance there. Your body is becoming resistant to your own insulin. And the secondary message of a high insulin level is to store fat. So insulin helps you to move sugar into your cells so it can be used for energy, but it also tells your body to store fat. It's a storage hormone. So, going back to your question about women, really struggling to lose weight, you want to look at that fasting insulin level because that tells you about the dynamic that is happening in terms of their blood sugar control. And then through salivary testing, I like to look at adrenal function, or what is now really referred to as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And that is basically your stress response. And so many things are involved in that and what that does to you physiologically, but it's triggered by your response to a stressor. And most people think of it as just your mental, emotional stressor, but we have a lot of physiological stressors too that we have to respond to. One of those being maybe low blood sugar. So when your blood sugar gets too low, if somebody goes for too long a period without eating, your cortisol level will go up because cortisol is a hormone that helps you to break down your sugar stores in your liver. It breaks down glycogen and mobilizes it in the form of glucose to stabilize your blood sugar and to keep your brain functioning, because your brain functions primarily on glucose and some fat. And so it's a priority for your body to keep your brain functioning. So it will mobilize your sugar stores to keep that happening. But that can also be a physiological stressor if it's prompted too much. And if you go for too long a period without eating and keeping some resources available. So there's a lot of things there. It can also have an effect on sex hormone balance. And, so that's another component that I like to look at is measuring sex hormones and seeing what the effect of all of the adrenals and the thyroid are having on the output of sex hormones. So it's sort of like a triad. And I like to look at all three of those things to get a really good picture of the dynamic between those systems and try to tie it into what's going on with the person who's sitting in front of me.
So farming, they poured arsenic into the ground to kill pests, like pesticide, but they're killing the living microbes, right? And now the arsenic is getting into our water supply. So many water supplies are heavy in arsenic. arsenic they used to give to chickens. It became outlawed a few years ago, but in the US they used to put arsenic in chicken feed. Now why would they do something so crazy? Because little bits are mitochondrial poisons. So mitochondria are the little organelles in our cells that create energy. So what did they do that for? They would damage the mitochondria of the chickens so that they couldn't burn fat. So they can't burn fat, but what are they good at? Making fat. So people are not suddenly becoming gluttons, and that's why so much of the population is overweight and obese. It's because they're being poisoned. Their mitochondria can't work. And this is what's happening to people.
We have something called estrogen dominance, which is where there is more estrogen relative to progesterone. This is, even when they're in their normal reference ranges on a test, for example, but the ratio is off. When a woman comes in, for example, and she presents with whether it's difficulty conceiving or it's very painful, difficult periods, heavy periods, acne, hair loss, perimenopause, endometriosis, fibroids, right? These are not coincidental. These are outward manifestations of something that's happening on the inside. When hormones are in balance, which means the rich interplay of how hormones come up and come low over different times of the menstrual cycle. When those things are in balance in a woman, we don't see endometriosis or fibroids. We don't see debilitating, heavy, painful periods, for example, or irregular menses. So when you see those kinds of those symptoms, those kind of outward displays of an inward imbalance, that says to me, as the clinician, something's going on that I need to look at. So I might do some hormone testing, depending on her age and what's happening. Sometimes I might not. I might feel like I understand what's happening. And what happens is that when your diet is poor and you're sedentary, you're overweight, you're smoking, you're drinking too much, whatever it is, not managing stress, well, these things over time will start to impact the way in which your stress hormones and your sex hormones are produced. And then the way that interplay starts to change, and you will start to see that there will be more of those issues, particularly when it comes to menstrual challenges like heavy, painful periods, irregular menses, PMS, things like that. So there's a tremendous amount that we can do just from a dietary and lifestyle perspective. Now, if it's actually determined through testing that, let's say, estrogen is low, or progesterone is low, which is very, very common. Or, again, talking about balance, we have something called estrogen dominance, which is where there is more estrogen relative to progesterone. This is, even when they're in their normal reference ranges on a test, for example, but the ratio is off. If I actually can see those things through the labs, then there may be things that I can do to help with that. And by the way, estrogen dominance is one of those things that I would associate not only with a lot of those menstrual challenges I just mentioned, but with the whole endometriosis fibroid component. Those are harder, right? Those are harder to fix with diet. I mean, certainly poor diet over a long time and poor lifestyle choices over a long time will contribute to those things, but it's less direct. And part of it's that we just don't fully understand why they happen either. But this estrogen dominance seems to contribute and be more associated with those kinds of growths, fibroids, ovarian cysts, endometriosis. So if you can see that progesterone is low, so I'll test like in the second half of a menstrual cycle, which is when a woman's progesterone should be at its highest after she ovulates. If it's out of range and it's low, or it's quite low in comparison to an estrogen that's much more robust or higher, then I'm gonna wanna do some things to address that. So first of all, I might look at lowering the overall estrogen intake. So if somebody's on birth control pills, for example, that could be contributing. But also, it's going to be affected by what we call xenoestrogens. So these are estrogens that come from the external environment. Sometimes they're called endocrine disruptors because they disrupt the endocrine system. Xenoestrogens don't just affect women, right? They affect men, they affect children, they affect all of us. And I would put xenoestrogens in that larger category of endocrine disruptors. I heard somebody at Stanford once refer to endocrine disruptors as obesogens. So if you think about, how these different chemicals, they're not just impacting estrogen receptors, right? They're impacting all the different hormone receptors. And men have estrogen receptors, right? So it's not just that, but it would impact any hormone receptor, any cortisol receptors, insulin receptors. These are all hormones. And then of course, the more overweight we get, the more visceral fat that we have, right? This is very impacted by xenoestrogens and endocrine disruptors also. And then of course, the more visceral fat we have, that becomes its own endocrine organ, makes its own hormones, its own inflammatory cytokines, so it's a real vicious cycle. So I would say, I kind of mentioned some of the things that I look for in women that make me think about estrogen dominance, right? But so with men, obviously I can't see what's happening with their menstrual cycle, but I can see what's happening with their weight and their muscle mass and their mood and their energy levels, and so I would think about similar kinds of things. I mean, I have a handout that I give to a lot of my patients, male and female, and a lot of it is really the same around the avoidance of these endocrine disruptors, including xenoestrogens.
Yeah, you definitely see more and more people coming in with these different issues than you used to hear about. Part of it's genetics. Thyroid, and particularly for women, can be very common from generation to generation, especially if there's an autoimmune component, meaning the immune system is actually flagging or attacking that part of the body. A lot of it, unfortunately, is from just the toxicants we'll find in our environment, everything from the beauty products that we use to the cleaning products, just breathing the air. So all those things can affect. They become hormone disruptors, as you can hear this term a lot. You can see that through hormones being added to our foods, to pesticides, to chemicals that we're exposed to. So that just adds stress to the body and can start affecting the thyroid one way or the other.
You've got all these environmental toxins coming in from health and beauty aids, your laundry detergent, your dishwashing detergent, your shampoos, your body lotions. All of those have chemicals in them, perfumes. All these things have chemicals in them. So we in the 21st century are taking all these things in. And if we have gut dysbiosis and a heavy load of toxins in our system that aren't moving through, that's like a double whammy. And often where one goes, the other goes. The dysbiosis naturally kind of backs up the system, and then you end up with toxic overload. So that's another big part of hormonal production. There are a lot of things that happen to our body that actually make our gut not work as well as it should. And a lot of those things are environmental toxins, actually, such as the glyphosates in the foods that we eat, the herbicides that are sprayed on our foods. They could be environmental toxins from the air we breathe that put heavy metals into our system. The water we drink could have nickel or cadmium in it. We could be eating fish that has mercury in it. We could be eating foods out of things that are wrapped in plastic or microwaving in Tupperware. Or we could be drinking a lot of water bottles, plastic water bottles, and getting the plastic particles. They're even saying now that the fish in the ocean that we're eating have plastic inside the fish itself. Add to that a leaky gut from the glyphosates and the GMO, or from the antibiotics that are sprayed on our food. That's what the herbicides are, and the glyphosates, or that we've been given antibiotics for anything from a sinus infection to a urinary tract infection to any number of things. And what happens when you take those antibiotics, either in pill form or through the foods that we eat, is that it essentially eradicates all of the good gut bacteria. So what happens is that you get an overgrowth of bad bacteria that kind of take over, to the point where the bacteria are actually kind of in charge of what we are hungry for, because they are hungry and they make us want to eat that toast or that cereal or that chocolate cake or things like that. They want the sugars, and that's what they live on. And all of these things are what are called endocrine disruptors, which means they inhibit your body's ability to produce your own hormones naturally. Stress, the idea that when you're stressed and you're dumping cortisol into your system, which happens to be a hormone, then you are inhibiting the hormonal production of other, they call it the pregnenolone steal. When your cortisol steals what is needed for your body to make testosterone or estrogen, that is what creates the problem that you're not able to produce enough of your own hormones because you're producing more cortisol, and that means you're producing less of your estrogen and testosterone. There's another important thing to also understand about hormones, and that is it's not just testosterone for guys or estrogen for women. It's estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, thyroid, melatonin. Melatonin's your sleep regulator. So sleep is another big factor of hormone production or lack thereof. If you have difficulty sleeping, if your circadian rhythms are off, then, or your habits are preventing you staying up too late watching bright blue television in not having a dark enough room, or having too much sugar or alcohol before bed, all of these kinds of things disrupt your sleep and therefore disrupt your hormonal production.
No matter how well a woman lives, no matter if she does yoga, meditation, exercises regularly, she is going to have menopause. It's universal. The goal is to push it back as long as possible. And we now know that when you have proper nutrients and lower stress, keep that cortisol from being elevated on a chronic basis, you will keep your ovaries healthier. But eventually it's going to come. And most women don't understand what menopause really is about for their bodies, because the word is really a total injustice. Meno is from the Greek word for moon, and pause is to stop. So it just makes it sound like, oh, your period stopped and now you can't have babies. But it is not just that. It is that, but it's much more. And we have to think of it not as crossing the finish line or like a hard stop, but really a process. Ovarian senescence, ovarian aging is really what it's all about. And as we mentioned earlier, reproductive functions are completely interwoven with metabolic functions. So metabolism is the creation of energy. That's what life is. And so that process actually becomes more difficult for women as they go through menopause. And think of it as a transition. I wish that we could change the name. It's almost impossible into something like ovarian aging syndrome of women, because it's really a process. It starts, from birth, where our eggs are dying, that's why we have less eggs as we go through life, but it really sort of escalates, usually in the 40s. And women are not prepared because they don't understand that it's not just about you can't make babies anymore. It's about changing how your body works. Because when you don't have the same amount of estrogen, then you're going to be essentially like in a hormonally imbalanced state. And estrogen is the master of metabolic homeostasis. It's the master hormone. I have to defend estrogen because poor estrogen is criminalized, but it's not, it's essential for really having optimal health, but having it, of course, in the right beautiful rhythms and balance that women lose when they go through this transition. So women will always become more inflamed as they go through menopause. Their gut changes the bacteria. This has been shown, study out of Harvard, that when women go through menopause, the bacterial population changes, they become dysbiotic, and they get more leaky gut going through menopause. The incidence of depression and anxiety doubles, insomnia doubles, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, gut problems, acid reflux, they all increase. After menopause, women have significantly higher rates of osteoarthritis than men, higher rates of acid reflux than men, and all those emotional ills. So if women are not prepared, then how are they going to take proper steps to stay healthy. So I want women to be aware that during these years, and then for maybe the second half of their lives when they may spend in menopause, that they have to be really vigilant about working through the processes that they can with timed eating, periodic fasting, eating incredibly healthy diets, working on stress, because after menopause, cortisol tends to rise, which then creates a host of problems from chronic stress. So they have to be very diligent to work with lifestyle and get all the nutrients they need to really maintain all the functions of their bodies so that they not just live long. Women tend to live long, but they don't live well. Women, by the way, have almost 3 times the incidence of Alzheimer's disease as men. Women have more strokes than men. So women think they're invincible because up until menopause, they seem to have the edge. But that edge is gone when they go through menopause, and doctors don't even seem to realize that. We have a circadian rhythm, and everyone is messed up with their circadian rhythm. Every cell in our body has clock genes, and our master clock sits atop our optic nerve and senses light and dark. So we want to see bright light in the morning and have it really dark at night. And sleep is when our brain repairs itself. We have to get enough sleep. People now, they've done studies on Americans, they're all sleep deprived. You can't be healthy. And when they look at people who do shift work, they work at night. Many women work as nurses. I have a lot of them as my patients. They'll have a lot of problems. They have more diabetes, insulin resistance. They have more breast cancer, mood disorders. These are terrible things. Acid reflux. In fact, melatonin is a treatment for acid reflux. Why is that? Because you make tons of melatonin when you're sleeping in your gut. Oh, but only if you're sleeping. It's not going to pop up there without it. So instead of, taking melatonin, which I do prescribe, if once you get to actually sleep, hopefully you'll make some melatonin on your own, you'll feel so much better, because we know that acid reflux is such a prevalent condition. And the solution isn't to take drugs that block the ability to make acid in your stomach, because you need that acid to digest your food, and you will be nutrient deficient if you don't have that acid. You will almost for sure become magnesium, B12 deficient, which are critical for just about every function in the body. So we have to try to watch those drugs that people are on, because they often have tremendous collateral damage. So we work with sleep, and then timed eating, stop snacking, stop eating after about 7, 8 at the latest, because your pancreas goes to sleep. Even if you eat healthy food and it's late at night, a lot of times when people say, I'm eating all this healthy food, what time? Midnight. Uh-oh, that is not the right time. Your body is like 2 different creatures, day and night, and we can't change it. It's built into our genes. We are diurnal, we are not nocturnal. And so we have to accept that's who we are, right? If you want to be nocturnal, you'll have to wish for it in another life and be an owl, right? Or something, a bat. But we are humans, we are diurnal.
Stress hormones and sex hormones come from the same place. And if you are in a constant state of having an upregulated stress response, you are going to end up negatively impacting your sex hormone production, especially progesterone, because your body, if it's being called to make more stress hormones to help you manage perceived stress, is going to use the progesterone that you do have to make more cortisol. Right? It's called the progesterone steal, the cortisol steal, the progesterone shunt. There's a few different names for it. But so, that's another thing that's really important to consider with a lot of these hormonal issues, is going back and looking at stress. And obviously there are all manner of lifestyle choices to support stress response, supplements that can support adrenal health and stress response and anxiety. But that's a really important foundation with hormone balance, and I think it often gets missed because we just focus on the estrogen progesterone piece of it, and we forget that there's this whole thing over here which is really creating an obstacle to proper balance, because you're just stealing all that progesterone. So if they're a little estrogen dominant and then they're stressed out too, all that progesterone is just getting sucked towards the cortisol. And then they have too much cortisol, which is a whole other thing. Particularly to my female patients, I really try to impart the idea that self-care is crucial, that we do other care really well, and that we really need to be able to give ourselves back that kind of self-care. So sometimes I'll say to a patient, think about 3 people in your life who, when you see them and spend time with them, you feel full up when you leave. You feel nourished. You feel like, you know, you've got a big smile on your face. Think of 3 activities that bring you joy. Cultivate those activities. Cultivate those relationships, just like you make sure you put healthy food on the table from the grocery store and like you get to the gym, that those things are just as important and will go a very long way to keep you happier and healthier.
There's no way you're going to escape stress. Trying to escape stress is a stress itself. So thinking that life shouldn't be stressful, you know, and that everything should always be calm and easygoing and there's never going to be a problem, so that when you do encounter problems, you have this hyper-reactive reaction to it, and it's, you know, you overstress on the simple things. I think we should all expect that life happens, stress happens. How can you reframe this so that you don't elicit this like extreme stress response where you're overreactive and you can't wind down and you can't sleep and you're eating sugar and ice cream, trying to increase your happy neurotransmitter so you can feel better in the moment. So, you know, just getting some perspective, really. Reframing your stressors so that they're not stressful for you. You know, there are some things that are just inherently stressful, you know, like if you know, somebody in your family passes away, you know, that kind of loss, all of that stuff we all are going to face in life, but it's reframing stress in your life so that it doesn't get you down, it doesn't beat you down. And if there are certain things that are just too much for you to handle, knowing that you can make some changes and trying to get yourself out of that situation, because nothing is worth keeping yourself in a place that makes you unhealthy. So, you know, it's when we talk about our own internal physical health, so much of it has to do with where we are in life, the thoughts we think, and how we react to the things coming at us. So if we have some internal control over that, that's a great thing. We don't ignite that stress response, and which can trigger so many other things. So for me, I think it's just reframing those stressors. I know that I have to remind myself of that. You know, when I get stressed, I have to just sit back, take a breath, and say, how do I want to react to this? You know, we do have a choice. So if we can, in that moment of, you know, knee-jerk reaction, if we can pause for a moment, take a breath, and kind of think it through for a second. Like, how do I want to react to this stressor? Is it worth me flipping out about? If so, then go ahead and flip out. Maybe that's what you need to do at that point. If not, then, you know, think of another way to go. And then pre-plan how you're going to react to stressors. You know, what are 5 other options that you could have other than really getting stressed out to the point where you can't think clearly? What are some other things that you could do for yourself when you feel like your stress level is way up to here and you don't know how to move forward from it? What's going to get you out of it? And you have to pre-plan for that before the stressor happens, because you're not going to be able to, you know, figure that out in the moment. So it's good to have already thought it through. So I would say that is one of my biggest things, is to try and, you know, get people to settle down a little bit so they are not so reactive in life. So you have to look at things from a broader scale and a larger span of time, because it is a process. So, you know, for women out there who have issues, I would say the best place to start is to get rid of the things that you know aren't healthy. So start there. So sometimes it's easier to get rid of things that you know are bad for you than to try to incorporate a lot of new things that you know are good for you. So identify those things. You know, are you, you know, eating too much sugar? Are you drinking too much alcohol? Do you do too much caffeine? Start there. What can I get rid of to move in that direction of that continuum of health? Think about the things that you can get rid of first, and then start incorporating some dietary changes, making sure that you're eating meals throughout the day instead of snacking your way to dinner. So making a goal perhaps to plan ahead. I think most people these days have a sense of what a good diet is. They may need to refine that. They may need some education. They may need to read some books. But we live in a world with abundant information. And so the general message is not too many carbs, not too much sugar. Start reading the ingredients, understanding how much sugar you're getting in your daily choices. Start reading the labels, looking at the grams of sugar with the understanding that, the recommendations are 25 grams of sugar per day, 25 grams of added sugar per day. You can get that in one sweetened yogurt pretty much. And so people don't really know that until they start paying attention. So the first thing is to really start paying attention. What can you replace with the foods that you like that aren't really good for you? So finding replacement foods, getting rid of the things that you know are bad and replacing those with good things. And so that's a huge thing right there. And then eating balanced meals throughout the day, making sure that you're getting enough protein at each meal, making sure that you're getting enough greens and eating on that color spectrum, that dietary color spectrum. And getting rid of regular vegetable oils, including more olive oil and coconut oil, so all of the fats. So I usually give patients like guidelines for a healthier diet, and it's basically just lists of things that they can do. It's so hard to mention it all in just a conversation because it's sort of like a checklist that you let people progress through in their own time and in their own way and in their own ability. So, I think it's a process. That's the biggest thing I like to tell people is don't take on too much because you'll abandon the process. You'll be overwhelmed. You won't know what to eat and you'll just say, oh, forget it. So start small and just keep growing.
Foods like flax seeds and soy foods, right? So isoflavones in soy, for example, they actually come in and they have 1/1000th the effect or the bioavailability at our hormone receptors. So these are called phytoestrogens, not because they actually contain estrogen, but because they can impact our estrogen receptor. So if you start to encourage patients to include some foods that are high in phytoestrogens, you can lower that net estrogen effect. I know there's also a lot of controversy around soy, that soy isoflavones as a phytoestrogen can be really helpful. I think the thing with soy is really, it's fascinating to me because if you look at the research and the data on soy foods, cultures that eat soy foods, and cultures like Asian cultures that have a lot of soy foods in their diet, or if you look at studies on supplements that contain isoflavones, you will find that soy is one of the best studied plant medicines out there. And particularly in regards to women's health, they are largely very positive studies. I think a lot of the negative press that soy has gotten is from different very influential nutritional groups which have decided that soy is bad. If I was going to really go deep on the conspiracy theory thing, I would also say that I think the dairy lobby had a lot to do with a lot of the anti-soy movement. I generally advise people to not fill up their diets with garbagey soy junk food. Right? Fake soy bacon and soy this and soy that. Like it's just processed food, right? But eating some whole soy foods, having some soy nuts, having edamame, fermented soy, including miso and natto and tempeh if it's tolerated, a little bit of organic non-GMO tofu, which yes is processed, but if you're not eating it every day, I think that those are really wonderful plant-based protein sources that can be incorporated as part of a varied diet, and that in particular for women with estrogen dominant issues can actually be really therapeutic.
So we'll start with a few fundamentals. So we try not to overwhelm people. Now, I give a goal and then we take steps to reach that goal. So in terms of eating, this is what I recommend, and it's really called, and I didn't coined this term. I wish I had, but it's called the sustainability diet, and that came from the Harvard School of Public Health. And it's to sustain the individual and the planet. So what you do on the sustainability diet, it's plant-based, and the goal is to have 3 cups of varied vegetables with every meal. So if you have 3 meals a day, which we'll start with, I actually move people into having 2 meals, but that's more advanced. So we'll start with 3 meals a day, and try to have 3 cups of vegetables. That would be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a goal. Now I know most people probably are lucky if they have 1 cup, but you have to have a goal, and then you incorporate nuts and seeds and whole grains. Whole grains mean that they haven't been pulverized. They're not a powder. So it would be things like buckwheat and millet and quinoa and amaranth, even corn, but it has to be organic. I know that's really hard I know it sounds elitist too. I know it costs more money, but being sick is about the most expensive thing you could possibly have in your life. And in every which way, it is so expensive. Emotionally, the toll is, unbelievable. When you see it, it's worth buying organic millet, trust me. So you buy the grains, and then you have some of that with the meals. And then you're allowed 3 ounces of animal a day. Just 3 ounces would be like 1 jumbo egg, or just a little bit. Think of the animal as more like the flavoring, almost, like sprinkle on top. And get most of your protein from plant-based. So beans. Beans are amazingly healthy. They come in all different types, and lentils, and you wash them well. So you just clean them off. And also the grains, you should wash them really well, rinse them, cook them till they're nice and soft, and enjoy them. And it may take time if you don't have a taste for these things, but there's a million fabulous cookbooks out there. Get your family into eating those root vegetables. The fiber will help feed those trillions of little friends of yours that live in your gut. If we don't repair the gut, we will never have a healthy body. So we have to focus on fiber, nutrients. It's like a dance between the polyphenols, these magical ingredients in plants, and the little microbes. They actually match up. So you have to have the diversity of gut bacteria. You can't get that unless you have diversity of plants in your diet. And then fruit. I always say, don't be afraid of fruit. People are saying, oh, I can't eat fruit, it'll give me diabetes. No, people don't get diabetes because they ate an apple. That is not the cause of diabetes. So fruit is not just a sugar. It comes with all kinds of nutrients, polyphenols like quercetin and resveratrol and all these wonderful polyphenols, and tremendous fiber. So please have 1 fruit with every meal. So I'm giving you a ton of food. You'll never be hungry, right? If you even try to eat all this, when people try, they say, I can't eat that much. And they will never be hungry. And don't snack. That is really important.
It's difficult. I think every woman has their own path that they have to walk, and sometimes it takes a while for them to find it. But if they work with somebody who can guide them and use some good objective data, whether it's blood work or salivary hormone testing or other things that are really getting to the underlying issues of their problems, then you can really help them make some progress. Beyond that, the thing that we have to get to is just basic lifestyle, getting enough sleep, stress management, eating the kind of diet that is healthy for you. I mean, there's always these dietary trends out there, like right now, ketogenic diet is everywhere. And everybody wants to be keto, but not everybody should be keto. It doesn't always work for everybody. So, it's important for us to try things and maybe implement some of those ideas, but you don't have to embrace the whole thing if it just doesn't work for you and you don't feel good on it. So really what I like to do is help women find what diet works for them and go from there.
Fish oil is hugely important. Just getting a good amount of omega-3s can help reduce inflammation in the body, support cardiovascular system, brain health. So I high dose my fish oil. The biggest thing with that is you want to make sure it's a really good source. Unfortunately, fish does have high levels of mercury and other metals and toxicants, so looking for companies that sell the fish oil that are as clean as possible is really important. Things like vitamin D. Vitamin D3 is a very common deficiency in patients. And vitamin D is actually more of a hormone than a vitamin. So it's called a prohormone. You use vitamin D to help make other hormones. That's why it's called a prohormone. But it's also important with the immune system, with mood, hormones. So it does a lot of things. So vitamin D is really huge. Fish oil. I'll oftentimes do some sort of probiotic or gut support. And those are kind of my basic. Everyone starts there, and then from there we can kind of build upon it.
Our ancestral wisdom tells us that indigenous cultures for the millennia have been using certain botanicals to support libido, vitality, sexual vitality, desire, blood flow, hormone production. So some of these botanicals are things like Tongkat Ali, which is a Malaysian plant. There's another herb called fenugreek. There's two other supplements that are really, really good, and mostly because they have things like polyphenols and flavonoids. One is maca, and the other is cacao, and cacao is the same as cocoa. Cacao is the cocoa bean. It comes from the cocoa bean. And maca is a Peruvian tuber that you want to build up over time. It takes about 60 days for you to feel the full effect of maca. And of course, with cacao or cocoa, you'd want to eat a black, a dark chocolate, a low sugar, dark chocolate with as much polyphenols in it as possible, a highest amount of polyphenols. So maybe a 75 or 80% dark chocolate, and have maybe, a square or two of those a day. Herbs are not pharmaceuticals. You don't just pop one and feel an immediate response. What you want to do is gently build up those herbals into your body over time. Don't start taking fenugreek, tribulus terrestris, Tongkat Ali, maca, and cacao if you're not getting enough vitamin D, enough vitamin C. These are the things, and zinc and boron are also very important. Interestingly, with your hormones, you make testosterone or you make estrogen, but it's what's called bound estrogen or bound testosterone. And what boron does is it unbinds it from the protein that it's paired with so that it can be paired with your receptor. So it locks in like a lock and a key. And that's why if you're low on things like boron, magnesium, and other minerals, as well as low on some of the basics like vitamin D and vitamin C, you're not going to be able to produce your own hormones, or the hormones that you take won't take, if you will. They'll just slide right off. They'll be the most expensive pee you ever had.
There's some foods you can use too. Foods that are high in sulfur, for example, cruciferous vegetables, onions and garlic. But there are also supplemental forms of those things like DIM, I3C, sulforaphane, and glutathione additionally, which all can help metabolize that estrogen in a more optimal way. And then fourth, with estrogen metabolism, with estrogen dominance rather, the fourth step would be to try to up the progesterone to help balance out that estrogen a bit more. So this is an area where we might use herbs like Vitex or chaste tree extract is a classic herb that we use to support luteal phase progesterone production. Or in certain cases, we might actually give some progesterone to help balance that ratio. And that kind of estrogen dominance treatment protocol idea is something that can be used with a variety of menstrual issues. I would use it with fibroids. I would use it with endometriosis, and I would, potentially use it with fertility as well. And surprisingly, I would use it in perimenopause and menopause. A lot of people think about menopause as an estrogen deficiency, but in fact, it is an estrogen dominant time for most women, because even though they're making less estrogen, they're making even less progesterone. So the balance is off. So it's another way to do that.
So if you want to take the healthy, natural route, and you're getting your gut going and you're detoxifying, but you're still aging and your hormones are lower and you want to top them up, you'd want to top them up with bioidentical hormone replacement. But you don't want to do that until you're getting everything moving and you're giving yourself the basic, kind of USDA daily vitamin and mineral complex. At least you want to have your good multivitamin mineral every single day. That's the platform upon which all of these other wonderful botanicals rest and work better. There's endogenous, which means the hormones that you make yourself. And then there's exogenous, and those are hormone replacement therapy. And there's two kinds of hormone replacement therapy. There's bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and then there's patented products that are pharmaceutical products that are not bioidentical. They are what you would maybe consider, if you were a natural medicine oriented person, alien hormones, because they are patented, so they can't be exactly like the body, because you can't patent things that are exactly like the body. You can't get a patent on that. So when they change it, it's not actually bioidentical.
Hormone therapy is definitely an option, and which I'm a big proponent of. But recognize that when we give hormones, we're not replacing the ovaries. The ovaries put out estrogen in pulses through the day, and it varies through the day and through the month. And we don't do that when we give hormone therapy. So it's better, but it's not the same as having ovaries. So you don't get a free pass because you say, I'm on hormones. You still have to do all the lifestyle things in order to maintain your health. So if we just focus on the nutrition, food isn't the same anymore. The food that we eat today is very different from what our great-grandparents ate. So even organic food can be hydroponic, and that means it's not grown in the earth at all. So what happens to the nutrients that come from the earth? Oh, they're not there. So they try to put it in the water. It's not the same. It's not the same, but it's still called organic. And then we know that organic foods can sometimes be processed in ways that still get to be called organic. And this is really another problem, that they may be adulterating the word organic, so you don't even really know what you're getting. The soil is depleted. Like, we have very little zinc coming from the soil. Plants used to get zinc. Now we're all deficient in zinc. You can't have a healthy body without zinc. Iodine. The soil's depleted with iodine. Iodine is such a critical nutrient. The thyroid gland needs iodine. The breasts need iodine. Ovaries, women who have frequent ovarian cysts, they often have iodine deficiency. And of course, it's one of the leading causes of mental retardation when you have iodine deficiency during the neonatal years, during that time, because you need iodine for the brain. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So there's so many nutrients that are not in our foods. Almost everyone now needs to have some form of supplementation. And I do a lot of testing to see. But in general, 80–90% of people are deficient in magnesium, even when you eat the right foods, because they're different. So we need to understand farming is not the same farming that it used to be. They're putting in very strange chemicals into our foods. I mean, it's so bizarre when you think what they put in the ground, and they're killing the microbiome of Earth. And the microbes in our ground actually set the tone for the nutrients in the plants. It's very frightening. I always worry that I come across as too negative, because it is what it is. But we have to be honest that we have to change things. Everyone should be an environmental activist, because we have to protect our earth. All of this is very prevalent. So we have to think of that poor person who's eating everything right and isn't doing well. They may very well be just eating nutrient deficient food. And there is a limit to how much you can eat. So that's where we have to choose the best we can.
There's lots of information out there on the internet, which is great, but it also can be very confusing. Patients come to me all the time, oh, I've tried turmeric. Well, turmeric is really not well absorbed at all. So if you're not taking a turmeric that has black pepper in it or is liposomal, you're probably not getting a whole lot of it. The other thing is dosing. So you have to make sure that you're taking a therapeutic dose. Patients will come to me taking fish oil, and they're taking 1 cap a day. Well, I have them take 2 or 3 caps twice a day, right? So it's having that guidance that's gonna help to give you the therapeutic knowledge and the therapeutic benefits that's gonna get you to the point you wanna be.
So you need to go to the Environmental Working Group's website, and then you can really freak yourself out about all the things that you should not have in your house, which is a lot of them. So, I think part of being healthy is a process. And, so you have to just start with where you are and, and think about where you want to be, and think about, 6 months to a year out, and know that this is a process, not an event. And the more healthy things that you can incorporate into your life and the unhealthy things that you can get rid of, the more you'll progress on that path. And in hindsight, you'll know how far you've come. But in the midst of working towards that, it can seem like you're not getting anywhere. So you have to look at things from a broader scale and a larger span of time, because it is a process.
Fragrances and the toxins and the new chemicals and heavy metals, we can really just make an effort to make changes in our lives to get those out of at least our immediate house, right? We can change to green cleaners, we can change to non-toxic personal care items, we can buy organic, we can buy at our farmer's market. So those are things that we can do. We can filter our water, that we can do every day to at least lessen the burden. Because even if we do everything right in our house, we still have to be out in the world, right? So, not everybody's caught up with that. So minimizing toxins anytime you can in your control is huge.
One of the best things that women can do who are concerned about hormone balance issues, and frankly probably every woman even if she's not, is really look at reducing some of this chemical exposure. And some of the best ways to do that are things like eating organic food, reducing pesticides and herbicides that are used on our food, which do impact our own estrogen receptors. Also our personal care products. And the average woman puts more than 10, I think it might be 14 different products on her body every day. Between makeup and moisturizer and hair products and nail polish, and if all of those things have these chemicals, which have never been tested in large amounts, very few of them. I think something like 80, we can check this number, but I think something like 80 of these types of petrochemicals have actually been studied at large doses in humans, and the vast majority, because they're very related to each other, have not. And most of us are exposed to very small amounts, not large amounts, of many of them over the course of a lifetime. So it's just an experiment, right? But we do know that this impacts our hormone receptors. So one thing that you can do for hormone balance is look at xenoestrogen exposure. Another thing that you can do is look at effect at the estrogen receptor. Some of those petrochemicals and xenoestrogens, they will have effect at our estrogen receptors that are tens to hundreds or even more times stronger than our own estrogen.
Your skin is the largest organ in your body, and it is a big detoxifying organ. Getting enough water, it sounds so simple, but most of us run around dehydrated all the time. So flushing through the kidneys, flushing through the liver, making sure that your liver is in good shape. You've probably talked a number of times on this event about N-acetylcysteine, NAC, and NAC, which is a precursor to glutathione, is what helps your liver flush toxins through your body. So liver cleansing, but not drinking a bunch of oil or things like that. That's not what you want to do, not those kinds of cleanses. You want to do nice, gentle cleanses of kidneys, liver. And then you want to look for some kind of detoxification that can perhaps be in the blood and cross the blood-brain barrier, because you have a lot of heavy metals that get stored up in your head. You know that your brain is made, a lot of your brain is made of cholesterol. And cholesterol, interestingly enough, is not a fat, it's a wax. Your brain is wax. You've heard about the plasticity of the mind. Well, imagine that wax can be remolded very easily. And so the idea that your brain can continue to learn and continue to thrive if it's fed good, healthy fats, that is what supports your brain. But you also have to have detoxification through the blood blood-brain barrier so that you can get those heavy metals out of your system. So things like cryptolinolytes and things like that can be very good for blood and blood-brain barrier detoxification of heavy metals.
Well, detox is part of it, right? So I think estrogen metabolism, the way in which you're going to transform your estrogen into that 2, 4, or 16, that is going to rely on liver health, basically through phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification in the liver, right? So those detoxification pathways in the liver are how we dismantle all of our hormones, not just estrogen, any prescription drug that we take, any drug that comes in from the environment. We have to change it from something that's fat soluble, which is how most hormones are and a lot of these petrochemicals are, and we have to transform it into something that's water soluble so it can be excreted. That's the liver's job, right? And there's phase 1 and phase 2, and metabolites are created in the middle. So if you've got like a great phase 1 and a lousy phase 2, and you end up with all those intermediary metabolites running around, you're gonna be almost in more trouble than if your phase 1 wasn't working, right? So they kind of create this, there's a lot of places for it to fall down. So looking at liver health, looking at gut health, right? Because it goes from the liver, you want to excrete it either in the stool or in the urine. So it's your kidneys, it's your gut. Are their bowels moving? What's the microbiome like? Right? So you really can't do this hormone balance stuff without taking a look at what's going on in the gut and the liver, both together. So that's a piece of it too.
The liver does over 200 things in the body. So when it's impacted, it's a big deal. I mean, and it's different for everybody. It can manifest differently. And so that's why I think a lot of times it's not an obvious go-to for, for people to identify, because for me, it could be skin irritations. For somebody else, it could be head pain. For somebody else, it could be digestive, issues. Stress, toxins, those are some big ones. Chemicals. I mean, that all is under the toxin umbrella. Whether it's our processed foods, whether it's industry, fossil fuels, what's in the air, driving, new car smell, chemical. I mean, it's endless. Prescriptions, fragrances, personal care products, cleaning. We're really being bombarded at a rate that we've not seen in the history of humans. And our body naturally detoxes, but it not like this, not under these conditions. And it hits adults and kids even more so, right? Because same amount of toxins, tinier body. So we used to say kids were born with a clean slate and they just, toxins bioaccumulate, and it's not the case anymore. There's over 200 toxins when they do umbilical cord testing in babies. So that, they're not coming out with a clean slate, and that's impacting them like from the get-go.
Unfortunately, we're exposed every day to these different toxins. So if we can detox our bodies ahead of time, before we conceive, that can also help, because you do, unfortunately, besides passing on your genes, you do pass on your toxic load, especially to your firstborn. So detox before you get pregnant, even if it's for a few months, it can make a big difference. Preconception health is all about getting man and woman as healthy as possible before they conceive. So we have about 4 months. It takes about 4 months for eggs and sperm to fully develop. If we can take 4 months to get you as healthy as possible and give your body all the building blocks it needs, make sure that we address any pre-existing conditions, we can help you so that you're making a baby that's really healthy. It can help reduce the risk of allergies, autoimmune later on in that baby's life. So that to me is just such a great way to impact health on a global scale. And just really help with people that are going through this beautiful transition of bringing new life to the world. So mom is directly sharing blood supply. When I was treating Lyme disease, a lot of times they would test the umbilical blood cord to see if there was Lyme spirochetes being transmitted, and you often do see that. So you have to remember that, yes, you're sharing blood supply to give them all these nutrients, but if you're heavy with toxins, you could potentially pass that on to your baby too.
Everybody should get in the habit of getting a copy of their lab tests, so that they can see where in the range they fall. Keep good medical records for yourself, because if you want to go and see another doctor, it makes it that much easier for you to just bring your records and provide, what was done, instead of chasing around, through records requests and whatnot, trying to get the information so that if you go and see another doctor, they want to know what you had done so that they don't repeat it, or that they can compare when it was done to when they might be doing some testing to see how you might be trending. So keep records, that's the first thing. If I had to take 4 main things, it would be exercise, daily motion. I mean, it doesn't have to be like exercise, but it can be moving your body, getting out and moving, staying active. The other is getting a good night's sleep, really paying attention to sleep. A lot of people tend to burn the candle at both ends, thinking that they're progressing in life, but you're really just driving yourself into an early grave. So getting a good night's sleep, taking in good food, good water, and the fourth one I think would be just stress management and reframing your stressors in life, because we all have them.
The 1, 2, 3 would be a whole foods, anti-inflammatory diet, to limit processed foods and really focus on densely nutritious proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. You don't have to eliminate any of the macronutrient groups, and just pick the right ones. But a whole foods anti-inflammatory diet, moving your body, and that, yes, being active every day is really important, but actually having exercise bouts, pushing yourself towards your target heart rate, doing strength training, these things are crucial not only to have an optimal weight, which is such an important thing to reduce your risk for all manner of chronic disease, but also improves your mood, improves your skin, improves your self-confidence.
The number one thing that I'd recommend that you do to really get your health going is actually get moving, because your blood flow is very important to your overall health, your digestive system, your ability to move your food through your system. Getting moving above all things. It makes you sleep better, it makes you healthier, it makes you digest your food, it makes you poop better, it does all of the things that you need. So a walk every day, I say 20 miles a week, get your little activity tracker on your phone and try to get 3 miles in a day and make that your number one goal. And that will pay off in spades with a much healthier, happier disposition and more connection and intimacy. Even if you feel dog tired right now, I want you to know that you can turn your health around, and you are taking a step right now to do that just by being here in this moment, taking this information in. And I just want to applaud you for taking the steps, because especially if you don't feel well, it can be overwhelming to try to get your health back on track, but it is always one step in front of the other. All you have to do is focus on the next thing. That's all you have to do.
Supplements and all that is great, but it really is about foundations of health. It's about work-life balance. Stress is huge. Stress is one of those things that's going to absolutely affect the immune system, including the hormone system as well. So we talk about sleep, we talk about times for rest, we talk about what are your tools for stress, whether that's meditation or exercise or just being outside. We talk a lot about diet for sure, trying to find a good anti-inflammatory diet that works for that individual person. So that's what I also love about naturopathic medicine, is that it tries to individualize treatments for each person. But foundations of health is huge. So stress, sleep, diet, exercise, all those things are definitely I talk to all my patients about that. And then from there, we'll kind of individualize different treatment protocols based off of what supplements or herbs or whatever else they may need.
Many different kinds of people come to me. I work with kids or parents, with kids. I have a 9-year-old myself who we went through some lifestyle changes, eating changes when, we were seeing educational difficulties. So that's very important to me. I think educating parents is huge, but I'm also a mom and, I have a career. So I think that's a big market as well of, underserved market, right? Of moms running themselves ragged and being stressed and overscheduled and never giving, themselves any self-care. So really teaching women and men, how to do that, how to really listen to tune into their bodies. And that really can affect anybody. I think it's just much simpler. And it's different for everybody. You know, not everybody needs, you know, this kind of help or that kind of help. You really have to look at it as an individual. And I think that's part of it is like, you know, training people or empowering people to tune in to what they need. Because I don't know how you feel. I don't know how anybody feels, but if you tell me, we can work on what might specifically help you.
You can change all of that, but it's hard work, right? The doctors say, well, I could talk about lifestyle, but no one does it. Well, that's not my experience. When you really educate people, they want to be healthy, they want to feel better, and they will change what they eat, when they eat. That's the other thing, you know, we eat incessantly. Sometimes we should stop, you know. It's called time-restricted eating and fasting, which is one of my niches. I work a lot with fasting. You know, what we're doing is we're harnessing the innate mechanisms of the body to heal itself. And that's what we have to do. And women with PCOS, women with endometriosis, uterine fibroids, infertility, which is on the upswing, can be helped so much with what I call basic lifestyle changes. And that, yes, they can be hard, but they're so successful.
Making new behaviors and helping patients, coaching them to make new behaviors is a huge part of health, empowering them. Again, I think most people miss that when they go to their conventional doc, so I try to drive that home. And I also try to remind them that everybody's different and that what works for one person isn't always what works for the other. So, you know, connecting, going back to the basic dietary lifestyle things that the patient has the power to modify and change, and giving them some resources around that. And then remembering that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, because they're different, and it is reasonable that we should have some control over our health and the outcomes. This is my life. Right? This is your life. So obviously you should be participating in this discussion about how we're going to make it better. I am a team with my patients, and we're a partnership. And that's part of what I talk with them about at our first meeting. And it's in the paperwork, literally, you know, when they come into the office. So they have a certain responsibility to show up, to follow through, to be compliant. I have a certain responsibility to show up, to listen, to be present, to not be buried in my notes or in my laptop, right? I mean, we're working together. And I'll say to them sometimes, here are some options. I think that they're all doable. What resonates with you? People love that. And in fact, sometimes I think it's the people who, you know, have eaten the most poorly for the longest, who have barely ever exercised, who have been, you know, eating processed foods and not thinking about chemicals in their foods at all. When they get educated and they just clean house and really change their diet, start to move, I mean, sometimes those are the people who, like, in a month, you see these really miraculous changes. But even if, you know, I live in Santa Cruz, California. I mean, most of my patients come in with some pretty amazing diets, some pretty exceptional lifestyle. So a lot of them have already started to do this work. But even just supporting them further to continue taking it more steps further, and possibly adding in some supplementation and herbs to support them as well. I've seen people make really big changes. So I think that this is an area where there's a lot of possibility for people, which is why it's particularly sad when so many women walk in the office feeling really defeated because they don't feel like there's anything for them but birth control pills, which is, you know, pretty much the party line. So if I'm talking to a woman who's having hormonal issues, like let's just say very heavy bleeding, right? You know, the idea of her having a procedure, an ablation, an endometrial ablation, or even a hysterectomy, these are procedures that are on the table as part of her decision-making process, and they should be. But there's also a whole bunch of other things that should also be on the table as part of her decision-making process. And the problem is that in most cases she's only being presented with this, maybe a birth control pill, right? But if we can intervene and talk about diet and lifestyle, and we can use herbs and supplementation, and, you know, we can present all of these things, that's very empowering to the patient. You're giving the decision-making process back to them.